So I said, let me ask you a question. And he said, nobody ever asked this question. And it must be because of MIT, my relationship to MIT. Very smart. He goes, I say, what would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery and the battery's now underwater and there's a shark that's approximately 10 yards over there. By the way, a lot of shark attacks lately. Do you notice that? A lot of shark. I watched some guys justifying it today. Well, they weren't really that angry. They bit off the young lady's leg because of the fact that they were not hungry, but they misunderstood who she was. These people are crazy. He said there's no problem with sharks. They just didn't really understand a young woman swimming now really got decimated, and other people too. A lot of shark attacks. So I said, so there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards, or here. Do I get electrocuted? If the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking. Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, you know, nobody's ever asked me that question. I said, I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot of electric current coming through that water. But you know what I'd do if there was a shark or you get electrocuted? I'll take electrocution every single time.
I've read Marx. I've read Engels. I've read Das Kapital.
The world is run by Trotskyists.
Hardcore Trotskyists.
How great an anti-American Marxist.
They're controlled by Trotskyists, as you put it, and these are the most evil, sick human beings on the face of the planet.
Oh my God. You're listening to The Left Opposition on Spotify. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Oh my God.
Complete nonsense.
He's so good. I can see why people like him. He's just like me.
The wokeness has gotten down to the sharks. How they were raised.
It's the woke electric battery, which, by the way, batteries have always existed on boats. Yeah. Apparently boats are woke now. These heavy boats are sharks. And this is the guy, his relationship to MIT was that his uncle went to MIT one time. He's like, yeah, great genes, brilliant genes. and so like, this is a guy that thinks that if you pour water on magnets, it's boom, that's the end of the magnets. And I'm not an engineer, but I'm pretty sure the water just kind of shorts.
So like,
up.
I can follow his reasoning a certain distance, and then he shifts over to the shark, and then back to the battery, and then back to the shark, and I'm like, okay, where are you going? Where are you going with this? Like, he completely demolishes his own. I'm not even sure what he was trying to say, other than it. He never actually says what he's. Or, I don't know. Maybe it's outside the clip.
It was supposed to be. I think it's supposed to be a rant against electric boats. He's trying to reach out and appeal to the people in his audience who hate anything electric. It has to be gas powered, right? It has to be.
This is actually how I would sum up his what he said, because I'm actually not sure what he said. And forgive me if you've heard this before. Mr. Trump, what you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
I can't argue with that.
Yeah. Best scene in that movie.
Billy Madison. Oh, it's such that's such a great line. On the program today, we have a little bit of MAGA communist news to get to. Just really small updates. Eddie Liger from Midwestern Marx liked a Nazi video. I think that's worth diving into a little bit. The friend of the MAGA communist Jackson Hinkle, Alex Jones, has to liquidate InfoWars to pay off the $1.5 billion settlement. And they've launched the Institute for Free America. Infrared, Midwestern Marx, and Jackson Hinkle have gotten together to launch this. And then we'll talk about there's a pier in Palestine that cost $220 million to make. Turns out it was not used for aid. It was used for a raid to attack Palestinians. That'll take us to Yeah, kind of what I really the kind of the meat and potatoes of the pod of the episode. I have a thing on Trotsky's permanent revolution and how it applies to like Palestine. And AOC has an anti-Semitism rally, which I think you guys will enjoy. So let's just dive right into it. So let's see. Earlier this week, Eddie Liger, founder of Midwestern Marx Institute. Now, I've always kind of liked Eddie, like early on. He just did really basic videos on, basic Marxist texts. Like you go one chapter at a time on imperialism, for example. Like, and they're decent. Like, they're definitely worth checking out. And then just over time, over the last couple of years, they've really moved far to the right. And how this happens, I don't know. So here's some people are saying this is mask off. So here's a video that shows Eddie Liger's Twitter. You can see it here. You go over to his like section and scroll down, and he clicked like on a video by a Twitter guy named Bullseye. It's called Vibe Check, and you hit play, and you end up with this Nazi video that Eddie Liger liked. Yeah, you sort of get the idea. So it scrolls back up. He liked that video.
I read elsewhere that
very bizarre.
being able to see people's likes is going away on Twitter.
Yeah, if he'd only waited like a few weeks.
I know.
Maybe this is why they did it.
That would not shock me, since like I know Jackson Hinkle has had communications with Elon Musk. Jackson Hinkle is one of the most engaged people on Twitter. That would not shock me one bit that this had a part in having our likes removed from Twitter.
That's crazy.
Now,
so just for the listeners, do we want to just briefly describe this video?
Yeah, so it's got some nice in color shots of German bombs falling out of the sky, blowing up towns, formations of bombers in the sky. Just German soldiers, World War II. We got Hitler.
I recognize
we got
some of that. Like there are panzers, moving into the Eastern Front, bombing civilians. Yeah,
the flag of the Death's Head unit.
There's the Totenkopf of the SS.
Yeah,
are we the baddies?
Oh Jesus! Got to throw that. You got to throw a Jesus.
Yeah, a crucifix.
Oh, maybe that's why he liked it. Yeah.
I thought the Nazis were secular communists. That's what I was told.
No, they were all gay and trans, according to Jackson Hinkle.
Incredible.
So all these gay trans
must
people.
Be why he liked it in the first place. I mean,
obviously, yeah. So here's
put two and two together.
Oh my God! Like, there's no consistency with these clowns, right? And I don't. People ask. By people, I mean I ask myself. Is like, why do we spend so much time on these guys? And
imagine thinking Hitler's cool. Like, not even just because he's Hitler, but just as a guy. Fucking look at him. He's so. And these guys love fucking, their idea of masculinity. And then you see Hitler giving a speech and doing the fucking Roman salute. Look at how what a little prissy fucking boy he is.
Well, it's more than that. I mean, look at the text below. It says vibe check, and then it gives a little lightning bolt.
Yeah,
and it's not just Hitler giving the speech. Like, I'm seeing, the aesthetics of the politics, the aesthetics of manhood that this guy prizes.
I mean, Eddie, from what I understand of him, he's a wrestling coach and everything. So, and I'm not saying that's necessarily like a reactionary profession, although I do wonder if he had too many hits to the head, but that's a whole other question. Politically, he certainly has had plenty of hits to the head. But yeah, if you watch Eddie, if you watch Noah, if you watch Hinkle or Haas, they're all about this kind of over the top hyper masculinity. And if there's anything you get from watching, old footage of the Italian black shirts or this German stormtroopers, it is this assertion of, masculinity. Germany awake, the Volk awake, women who are consigned to the kitchen, having 5 kids, going to church and whatever. That's the kind of thing. And you find some of that in Stalinist propaganda, but even as regressive as Stalinism could become, it was never at this level.
Yeah, women
and
were
there
like
was at least the
scientists
verbal assertion to women's liberation, whether in the Soviet Union or China. Something you certainly would not find in Italy or Germany.
Yeah, you don't get this trad wife shit coming out of revolutionary Russia and the Bolsheviks, right?
Yeah.
One thing I will say, and this is just pulled from my personal experience, just the overall vibe of the video seems very familiar. It seems very familiar because when I was in the military, our squadrons, everyone I had been in would make videos. I was in the B-52 of the B-52 dropping bombs and doing things, and they would put it to the music of what was it? Let the bodies hit the floor or something like that.
I thought you were going to say Rock Lobster.
Well, no, but yeah, like the vibe would be the same. The hyper masculinity. Look at this. We're so cool. This is our job, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm trying to say is I think this vibe isn't limited to just these sort of like basement dwelling, national Bolsheviks or whatever they call themselves at this point, MAGA communists. I think it's much more widespread in the sort of the. I'm not going to say the whole population. That's far too wide. But if you, I don't know. I guess it seems more commonplace than people would like to think, and it doesn't have to rely on the Hitler imagery to get the same vibe across. Like I think a lot of people are invested in that hypermasculinity every day, and you might not even recognize it, and they don't use that overt symbology. You know what I mean?
So something else to note about this, on the one hand, it may seem kind of like petty to go after someone for liking something on Twitter or Facebook, but it's like, I don't go around like really liking Nazi and fascist shit. And but it's also telling because one thing you get from the far right, and it's clear to me that Eddie that's where he is, him and the whole Miss Midwest remarks, is they really like the aesthetic of like, these masculine men, these people marching in formation, because with fascism, obviously fascism, even when it claims to be socialist, is bullshit because it never challenges that in practice. But there is this appearance of like, people in dashing uniforms, marching in formation, synchronized. There's this whole aesthetic of people participating in these rallies, but they're not changing anything. They're given that, the appearance of it. And these people really like that appearance of it. And you find that, that's kind of, I think, part of their appeal to, MAGA is they really like the appearance of, these strong, their idea of like strong, stereotypical burly men and those stupid red hats and everything at Trump rallies. They really like that kind of stuff because, I think the Midwestern Marx people are slightly more knowledgeable about Marxism than like Haas and Infrared. That's not to say I think they understand it, but that's another point. But they really like this surface level stuff, which is like they see like the far right. They talk about like challenging the system and stuff, and it's like very surface level their understanding of it. So we could win them on that. It's like, well, you're winning them to something, or you're winning people to something. It's not Marxism because they never look underneath. Because the fact that you think there's a MAGA working class is like really stupid on its face, and by any metric, any poll, any study of it, these are petty bourgeois reactionaries in bulk. And again, I just think like, yeah, on the one hand, it's like it may seem petty, but it's like it's a deeper thing because it's an expression of a deeper part of their politics. Is this kind of Nazgul, this kind of like third position fascist shit?
Personally,
sorry, go ahead.
Personally, I'm willing to grant that he might have just accidentally liked it and someone caught him doing it. Because like that is a very bad. That's like even like you must have some semblance of optics, right?
Yeah,
and aesthetics, especially as you said. But like, I'm willing to grant that this may have been like a pocket like or like just an accidental thing. Because like God knows, like
I'm not sure.
I've accidentally double tapped on like Instagram pictures and stuff and liked it then, and I'm like, whatever. Yeah. But then again, though, it's also extremely suspect. This is where I'm going with this. Why is this on your fucking feed in the first place?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say, actually, is because like either way, whether the like is intentional or not, you have to have been near enough to this video, which
that's fine.
Yeah,
you
why
know,
are you friends
I've
with these
been-
people?
Yeah. I mean, like, I've been on far right Twitter and Nazi Twitter and shit to see what these videos are like. And, you know, it's conceivable that I could have forgotten that, you know, like, it was,
I mean, even if it was a mistake, it shows your digital footprint, like where you walked, even if you didn't mean to make a mark there.
right. But
It's
what I'm
like,
saying
wait a
is
minute.
that, like, you know, I watched this stuff to understand it. I feel like there's a possibility because they're already trying to appeal to the far right. They're looking even further to the right on, you know, how to appeal to them.
Well, yeah, sometimes a lot of folks do this is where they dip their toes in it just to see what the reaction is and to see, like, does it drive up engagement, or does it, you know, do certain people start coming out of the woodwork and start following you and start liking your stuff? And I'm not sure where Doug went, but I'm not sure where this kid went. Right, this is from 2 years ago. What happened to this kid?
Hashtag MAGA communism has been spreading on Twitter. I think Jackson Hinkle did this. And most of you know that I think tons of working class Trump supporters can be brought over to communism, and I try and do it all the time. But I have a couple problems with the slogan. One, I don't think we need to make alliances with bourgeois politicians. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump, unless they're actually fighting to end the wars, which Trump really didn't in his 4 years as president, then I don't really see anything we can ally with them over. Really, we should just be talking to working people and trying to get them to become socialists. Also, I have a problem with the saying, make America great again. When has America been great? I'm pretty sure as socialists, our opinion is that America will be great when America's a socialist republic. Because until now, our governments have been dictatorships of the owning minority versus the working majority. And America will only be great when we have a government that works for the majority. That's Marxism, y'all. If America used to be great, John Hampton, Paul Robeson, Fred Hampton, and our heroes wouldn't have had to fight so hard.
Okay, first of all, has anyone seen Third Rock from the Sun?
Yes.
And you watch, I forget his name, but the one of the members of the family who's, I mean, they're all aliens, but he always talks like this.
Oh yeah, French Stewart.
Yeah. That was my first. Is this the same person that liked it?
No.
Oh, okay.
This is not
All
French
right.
Stewart.
All right. No, I didn't mean it was French Stewart. I mean it was Eddie.
Yes, this is the same guy.
Yeah, okay. Yes, same guy.
So this is
Okay.
Eddie. That was Eddie from 2 years ago.
So he
He
went
sounds like
from
a Marxist,
this,
and that's
so he went from this to liking a video with Hitler posing and lots of flags.
yeah, and allying with the MAGA comms, exactly. Yeah, it's.
I mean,
it's
he
quite the arc.
even tells you in this video from 2 years ago what caused it. I think what caused it is he said, "My main mission is to bring over MAGA working class people to communism."
He thinks they can be won over, and I think
Yes.
how you do that, I'm not entirely sure. Like, I'm sure there's an economistic, view of that. Like, there's this idea that, like, well, if you just win them over with the right ideas, right? Because we've had the right ideas for 170 years and it hasn't worked. Or like, if you just reduce it down to like better working conditions, and only socialism can offer that. Well, then,
it's not even that, because in every instance where people were won over, it wasn't because someone sold them a newspaper on the side of the road, and then next thing you know, their cadre in like the former International Socialist Organization, et cetera, et cetera. It's because events drive people who are, part of the working class or petty bourgeois, and they get dumped into the working class, and they figure out what their actual material priorities are by the events. And the people who are closest to saying, well, what should happen is kind of how you get adherence. You get adherence as much from the conditions and events as you do from your education or your agitation. And so you've got this sort of disembodied ideology where, okay, I don't know where I'm going with that, because I'm trying to contrast, and you can cut this out, Aaron, if you like, but the left today, I think, are disembodied from revolutionary experience, and so they view it as a problem to be solved, of sort of a volunteerist. You sign up and you go, door to door, street corner to street corner with your newspapers, and you agitate and you tell people about your ideology.
Yeah.
You know, and how it's right for the working class, but you're not actually talking about the condition of the working class necessarily. There's a difference between Engels talking about, say, the working class conditions in England, right? He wrote a whole book on that versus writing about how my left sect can solve your problems. You're talking about a whole class that's affected by widespread problems in your country or in the world versus, you know, we've got the silver bullet. Those are two different arguments, I think.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I think, what was I gonna? Man, I'm so fucking tired.
sorry if I made you lose your train of thought. I was just trying to put words to what I've been feeling, especially after reading several chapters of Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution, and the way he sort of talks about the masses and how they come to follow the Bolsheviks sounds radically different from every left organizer I've ever talked to in my experience, who is sort of going out there and saying, well, my organization pays attention to your needs. And it's not always the case.
Oh, what does Trotsky say in terms of like how do workers come to follow the Bolsheviks and join the Bolsheviks?
Well, I mean, you know, Lenin and Trotsky and multiple other social democrats, as they called themselves back then, worked at education and agitation of the masses, trying to get newspapers started in multiple places in the country, you know, actually, there was the all-Russian newspaper, that was meant to unite reporting on events all over the country. But it's not like the worker or the soldier read the paper, was convinced, and became a cadre. They went to work, they went to war, right? And they found what their treatment was like in the plant, what their treatment was like at the front or at the rear, and they decided this is bullshit. You know, we don't like when our officers backhand us, you know, when we're just trying to get our jobs done. We don't like the way workers are dismissed with no reason by, you know, the factory owners, et cetera, et cetera. And they come to the realization that that this is intolerable. And those experiences, when they're widespread enough, generate a demand. Peace, land and bread, for instance, weren't just sort of like ideas that the Bolsheviks cooked up in, you know, the back boardroom and tried out on the masses like it's some sort of marketing scheme. These were genuine demands that happened due to circumstances caused by the Tsarist general staff who were running the war during World War I, for instance, or the what am I trying to say? Or the conditions that the landlords caused toward the poor peasants who were just trying to, you know, get a crop in, whatnot, or the people in the city who couldn't get enough to eat and would show up in bread lines throughout the Tsar's rule in the 20th century. You know, and those demands, when they're met with well, what am I trying to say? Usually these demands are addressed to the power, you know, so crowd of people show up 1905 asking the Tsar to ease their burden, and they're shot by the Tsarist troops. I think that was 1905, right? So that's a response from the ruling power, whether it's authoritarian, whether it's democratic. You know, how many times have we heard the cops showing up to one of our demonstrations that are perfectly peaceful, and they start busting heads, you know, and it seems completely out of proportion to what's actually on the ground. Well, there's their response, and then there's our party's response, which is to say, yes, we acknowledge your problem, and we have a party program. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and you reminded me of what I was going to say, because the first part you said about the conditions of the working class being kind of the missing element that we're not thinking about when we're trying to sell our beliefs on the marketplace of ideas, which that was what I thought of, because it was like, well, yeah, that seems like a really individualist, like modern day liberal, like American understanding of how politics happens. So there's that, which leads to, yeah, like the conditions have to be such that these people's ears can open up to what we're saying over in this corner. I just got a message because Chris made me an admin of Being a Socialist on Facebook, and I answered a message from this guy. He looked like maybe like a college age kid, and he said, "Hey, I just joined the group and I'm interested. I'm like trying to figure out if I'm a socialist or something." I was like, "That's awesome, man. Let me know if you have any questions or whatever." And he said, or I asked him, like, what got you thinking you might be a socialist? And he said, well, what we've got is not working. And I was like, yeah, that's like, everyone has to have that moment. And maybe a lot of the times we're like talking past people in conversations about socialism is that they just haven't had it.
Yeah, and that person's answer was actually more honest than anything else. My old instinct would have been, here are these 5 books, go read them, come back and talk to me. And I think today that's absolutely the wrong response, because when they tell you that things aren't working, you ask them to get specific, and then they start saying, well, I'm not making enough money to clear these bills that have increased. That's one thing. And then here's my treatment at work, or if he's in the military, the officer corps has gotten more punitive, have been humiliating people, beating people, and I don't think that's right. See, these are real material conditions that you can respond to versus here's my ideology. Ideology in theory, great. But I think they come later, or if not later, they have to apply to something. They have to apply to something that actually, that the person you're talking to matters to them. Because otherwise, they're just going to see it as a bunch of free-floating ideas. They've been trained, with bourgeois education to see everything as, just the perceptual understanding. You have this over here and this over here, and the two don't contradict. They're just more information piled up, willy-nilly. What actually applies to what they're saying?
What you said, Joe, really reminds me of my own experience organizing. And when I went and saw Christian Smalls of the Amazon Labor Union, when his talk, he said 90% of organizing is listening. And I'm like, that was absolutely true. That was the most effective way that I was getting my coworkers to sign union cards, was to get them to talk about what's wrong with this industry, right? What's wrong with this job that we're working in? And they go on and on and on. And then without prompting, they say, we need a union. And that's when I'm like, okay, come talk to me at lunch. And and then I pull out that was the easiest union card signing ever. It was great. But so what Eddie was talking about, and Doug, what we were kind of discussing was like, reaching out to MAGA people and like right-wing people. Like, can you convince them of socialism, or is this something that working people have to come to conclude their own conclusions in some way?
I mean, I think there's an interesting question on how you reach out to people, what your idea of mass work, or as the Maoists say, the mass line is. Because I mean, there are people you can convince, like, talking about the finer points of, dialectics or what have you. And that's certainly, I'm a big proponent of philosophy and theory, but there's like, when you organize, it's like, are you going to like organize as a Marxist, like at a Republican rally? Is that like really where you think your base is going to be? It's like during the civil rights movement, I'm really thinking that they did not organize in like the high points of Klan country, when they were doing like Freedom Summer in 1964, if you get my drift. You're going to try and find those points where you're going to have probably the most people, the most receptive to your message and ideas, like like we don't organize in stockrooms as Marxists. Maybe we could find someone in a stockroom who will be convinced and come over. I won't rule that out necessarily, but I don't think that's the most fertile ground for socialist and Marxist ideas. You got to kind of, that's why historically it's, the point of production or the anti-war movement, where the oppressed and exploited are.
Yeah.
And it's also like, there's obviously the differences when you organize between propaganda and agitation. I'm not going to give a long lecture on quantity versus quality and dialectics to a mass audience. It's just not going to work. You have to tailor it. And you can do that without betraying the essence of it. That's the thing these MAGA people or the patsies, they don't get is they think they have to appeal to them on their grounds. And they might win them over to MAGA communism, but they're really just winning them over to some stupid form of social conservatism. And you see this whenever people say, oh, we have 99% of times when I hear someone, oh, we got to meet people where they're at. It's to advocate some really opportunist politics. You can meet people where they're at. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but you can do that without bending over backwards to where they are and adapting your politics to what may not be the most advanced ideas. If you watch that stupid video of Haas at the Trump rally, he's just appealing to people on nationalism, on not so veiled anti-Semitism, and some vague talking points. If you see his followers on Twitter, oh, it's he is doing organizing. Yeah, he's talking to Republicans about Republican ideas. He's not talking to them about Marxism. Now, that's an extreme example, but it's you can find that in so many other things as well.
There's nothing I've seen about MAGA communism that hasn't ended up being extreme in way. I mean, the video you just showed us of the vibe check with all the Nazi propaganda, it's just Exhibit A.
Yeah, absolutely. And Haas straight up has said over and over again, conspiracy theorists and MAGA people these are my brothers in humanity. He'll always sit down with them, and most other Marxists he has called fraudulent and fake, and he hates other Marxists. There's
actually a name for the video you showed us, Aaron. Walter Benjamin, who is a sort of Western Marxist. In one of his works, he talks about I'm going to butcher the word, the aestheticization of politics, and how you sort of make a spectacle out of what's going on politically. And of course, Benjamin's dialectical turnover was the what was it, Doug? He reversed it. He said
if you give me a second, I can even find you the quote from that.
Yeah, it's at the tail end of the work. It's like the
it's called the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction.
Yes. It's like
I want to bring up the quote you're talking about because I pretty much was paraphrasing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, this is what Walter Benjamin says in his work, which is from, I believe, 1935. Okay, he says, fascism attempts to organize the newly created proletarian masses without affecting the property structure which the masses strive to eliminate. Fascism sees its salvation in giving these masses not their right, but instead a chance to express themselves. The masses have a right to change property relations. Fascism seeks to give them an expression while preserving property. The logical result of fascism is the introduction of aesthetics into political life. The violation of the masses whom fascism with its Führer cult forces to their knees has its counterpart in the violation of an apparatus which is pressed in the production of ritual values. And he actually ends the essay with, this is the final two sentences. This is the situation of politics which fascism is rendering aesthetic. Communism responds by politicizing art. And that's a very Brechtian essay if you've ever read it.
It's brilliant. It really is.
It's definitely one of his better essays. But yeah, if you watch Triumph of the Will or any Nazi rally, yeah, people are expressing themselves. They're all there. They're in this joyous people's community. They're saluting the Führer. Eddie would be right at home in this situation and everything. But yeah, they're expressing themselves. But when that ends, there's still capitalist exploitation is still there. Oppression is still there. It's even intensified, of course, under fascism.
And the question you should also ask them, you should press them on if you ever talk to any of them, is how will this change the problem that the masses or working people have with the situation? And invariably, they'd probably tell you, we don't want to change it. We just want you to express yourself, to look happy despite your oppression.
Yeah. Yeah. Hassan Piker says they're all theater kids, basically. Like they just love the performance.
Theater
It's like,
bros. Oh, yeah.
They just, it's like a social club and they get to like, dance their little hearts out with their MAGA shirts and shit.
And I think there is a certain performance to it too. Like Haas kind of blew up online because of his like flip outs and clipping his mics and stuff. And it is genuinely funny sometimes. But yeah, it's an interesting point to be made about the aesthetics of like why these guys are attracted to certain things, and it goes into that like hyper masculinity and stuff too, and there's very undertones of anti-LGBTQ and anti-Semitism, that sort of thing.
It also dovetails with the capitalism too, because these people have to make money in doing what they're doing. And we've come from a culture in the last 20 years where you have to brand yourself, brand what you care about. These people are engaged in branding. Online, this makes money. If they get so many followers, they're able to monetize it however they are. They're able to make money off of it. If they can't, they'll find something else.
Yeah, very true. That's why I'm convinced like Midwestern Marx went from like a bunch of guys online doing Marxist education to allying with guys like Jackson Hinkle. And I dare say Haas, who probably did make a decent living screaming and annoying his neighbors at like 2 a.m. Speaking of capitalists and anti-communists getting the due, Alex Jones announced this week that he is liquidating InfoWars to pay towards the $1.5 billion settlement lawsuit for essentially lying about the Sandy Hook victims and causing undue like stress and harassment, to say the least. Like just the hell he put these people through is just unprecedented, and people still they still think it's a conspiracy theory. So here's Alex Jones reacting to possibly one of his last episodes.
I believe in my parents. I believe in humanity. I just want to fucking stop these people. They gotta be stopped. We gotta stop them. So, at the end of the day, we're gonna beat these people. I believe.
But that's gotta be fake, right?
Is that fake? I mean, he's faked cried before.
Yeah. But, speaking of theater kids,
I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if this was real or fake. I don't know. Neither would surprise me.
Yeah.
But Alex Jones. And as always, Jackson Hinkle tweeted out, "I will always stand with Alex Jones." Mm-hmm. Of course you would, because you're both anti-communist grifters. So yeah,
they're both showmen.
Yeah, absolutely, you would
from beginning to end.
Now, I know Jackson Hinkle tweeted it out, but I can't find it. So I really suspect that either I'm an idiot, which is entirely possible. Like I can't find it, or he deleted it. Anyway, so yeah, that's been a fun. It's been a fun little bit of news. So Jackson. So we'll end our mega communist news here with the launching of the Institute for a Free America. That was unveiled this week by Infrared, Midwestern Marx, and Jackson Hinkle. You can go to, let's see, for Free America on Twitter. Where is it? Here it is. So it's got 4,088 followers. It's got an email address, info@thefreeamerica.org. And this is it. It's a Twitter feed and it's an email, and the banner is an AI generated cowboys in Utah.
Reminds me of scenes from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Sure.
Also, if you notice, like they're deliberately are including both Canada and the United States, because if you actually follow some of these people on Twitter, They really want the United States to conquer Canada.
Jackson Hinkle.
Do you see the size of this flag? This guy has to have a bicep like a bowling ball. I'm like, my God.
I mean, like these cowboys don't even have faces. Like they look like they live faces because they're AI generated.
That's great.
Wow. Okay, so what have we had so far? We've had the Project for a New American Century. We've had the Heritage Foundation. Right now we have the Institute for a Free America. I mean, like these things multiply like lice.
Yeah. And what was the rally against the war in Ukraine where they teamed up with like Boogaloo Boys and Jimmy Dore? What was that? You know the one I'm talking about? What was that called?
Oh, it's a Rage Against the War Machine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, there was that. And so it's just one new fucking bullshit Institute for a Free America. See,
and it's got the blue check mark. You can't do without that.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
These people have to have the blue check mark.
So they haven't posted anything since May, and it's currently June 13th. Again, it's just a Twitter feed and an email address, and they've got a surprisingly decent crowd here. Here's Haas speaking to a crowd of like probably looks like about 100 people. I would go to this probably if I was invited, just out of morbid curiosity. But yeah, you're right. The logo does contain Canada because Hinkle has called for the annexation of Canada.
He's a pan-North Americanist.
Oh my God.
It's a 37-minute speech by Hinkle. I don't really feel like going through it.
Oh my God.
Yes, please don't. Oh my God.
Yeah, May 25th. May 24th, Institute for Free America. And it's, you know, what's super funny is the first video they post. It's just a bunch of like, what's it called?
Shots of Antarctica?
Shots of Antarctica, but it's the negative. It's the inverse colors.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe I'm thinking of the Arctic and he's aiming at Canada.
And this is the music they choose. Let me know if you recognize where this music comes from.
So the Matrix.
That's from Loose Change.
It's the Matrix. Loose Change. Loose Change probably used it as well.
They used it. It was like a parody. Yeah, it's like it's a 9/11 like truther video.
So
yeah.
You're right. It's from the Matrix, and
I have seen Loose Change, but yeah, in the Matrix, where Morpheus is explaining to Neo that any one of them can be an agent. They're another computer program. Lady in the red dress,
oh my
right?
God,
this is the music.
That's right. Yeah.
This is the music they're using. Film made by conspiracy music
by two gendered sisters. Who you know the red and blue pill represents like estrogen.
You know, I'm surprised that they didn't like show like stills of the what's that weather control antenna that's supposed to be up in the northern hemisphere changing the weather. What is it called?
I don't know this
conspiracy theorists are talking about there. I don't know. There's like a bunch of dipoles. I should really know what I'm talking about here. Let's see, weather control.
Anyway, so that's all the MAGACOM news out of this week. Some funny stuff. So now
HARP.
HARP or DARPA?
It's called HARP. It's like it's a weather weapon or research facility, and it's called HARP. I forget what it means, but it's a some sort of government facility, and there are all sorts of conspiracy theories about it. And I was just saying, I'm surprised they didn't show a still of HARP in their little video of the Arctic with the music. You can just cut all of that. None of that made sense. Sorry about that. Yeah.
For any younger people listening to us, Loose Change was our plandemic.
Oh God. Not this again.
Yeah, I remember Loose Change. Yeah.
God, here's AOC.
Okay, so what do you guys want to get to? I've got AOC and her anti-Semitism rally, and I've got the news on the pier. We talk about the news. I guess this is more relevant to the podcast. Is like AOC, as you know, as we criticize so-called leftists from the left. So this was earlier this week. AOC did an anti-Semitic rally, and she did a live stream. on anti-Semitism. So the live stream begins with AOC. This comes to us from barbarism critic SX Arlet Red on Twitter. This is a thread on AOC's disastrous live stream on anti-Semitism. The live stream begins with AOC introducing Stacey Burdett and Amy Spidlnick, who are both Zionists, as the foremost experts on anti-Zionism, setting the stage for them to define anti-Semitism for everyone. Notice how AOC hedges to say Israeli government and not Israel, and uses qualifying words like inherently and necessarily.
Conversation today, and welcome. I'm incredibly excited for us to be doing this. In a minute, we're going to be hearing from two of the foremost experts from some of the most foremost experts in the country in fighting anti-Semitism in America. And before we get to that panel, though, I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this, and most importantly, why we're doing it now. Anti-Semitism, hate, and violence against Jews because of their identity is real, and it is dangerous. It is also important to say here in this moment and during that conversation that criticism of the Israeli government is not inherently anti-Semitic, and criticism of Zionism is not automatically anti-Semitic. That being true does not mean that we should not recognize when criticism and when that criticism crosses a line into real harms against our Jewish community. Conversation.
AOC introduces Amy Spidlnick, who is the CEO of the JCPA, a lobbying group. More about that later. Talk about supposed anti-Semitism on the left. Amy says anti-Semitism on the left is more painful than Charlottesville, that since 10/7, there's been a lot of anti-Semitism in progressive spaces. List of things she says are anti-Semitic while AOC nods along. The celebration of October 7th, the embrace of Hamas, chanting for another October 7th, calling for Israel to be wiped off the face of the earth, targeting Jewish institutions such as, in brackets, Zionist institutions, exclusion of Zionists from events, BDS, its boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and banning Hillel on campus.
Hey, Aaron, all that. Let's back up a little and just talk about AOC's introduction, because her introduction was it caused me as a listener more confusion. Like she didn't actually introduce the topic at all well. She makes a premise, and then she starts to say, well, it's more nuanced than that. And that's where the wheels just come off the wagon. Like, I'm not sure what her next sentences were supposed to be.
Well, first of all, she doesn't like to read. She's already told us that, if you go back to her interviews. Second of all, she has done exactly what she's accused people of. Back in October, there were protests in New York, which against the Israeli government and their genocidal war, which she condemned as anti-Semitic. And this is also on top of her voting for resolutions, condemning, anti-Zionist agitation as anti-Semitic. This is on top of her voting to fund the Israeli Defense Forces a few times. So she can shove it up her ass, along with her endorsing Genocide Joe and the Democratic Party. She is on no ground to speak on this because she has proven herself materially and ideologically an enemy of the people. And the fact is that she's talking to these AIPAC representatives anti-Semitism is real. I'm speaking as a Jew, a Jewish communist. I don't really care for the religion at all, but that's my background. Jews do not equal Zionists, but Zionists should be excluded from our movements. They are racists, they are colonialists, and they're for the same reason we exclude Klan members from our events. They are the same thing. The same reason we don't have Nazis at events.
Yeah, and the thing to note about this too is like she does this shit, and it's like, it's what we expected better from her on originally, but she just does it too. Where now she's like chasing the approval of fucking AIPAC, and it's like, dude, just that little intro she gave where she like gave caveats that like, you can criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic. It's like, you're done then. Like they're not going to give you credit for like taking two steps their way. But you would have to completely disavow us, like just everyone who supports you.
Amy Spittlenick continues that exclusion of Zionists by progressive movements is anti-Semitic and dangerous to democracy, and AOC does not push back, but instead agrees.
Conversation, we see how anti-Semitism is used to divide Jews from the very communities, the very pro-democracy coalitions we need to be in solidarity with right now. If our communities are pit against one another, if the vast majority of American Jews are being told they're unwelcome in progressive spaces because we have a connection to Israel or a relationship with Israel, that doesn't just make Jews isolated, unsafe, it makes all of us unsafe, and we'll never be able to come together.
I agree. That by tying Israel to the identity of Judaism, definitely, I think, puts a target on the back of Jews around the world. And that's why those need to be separated. In fact, as Trotsky himself described, a Jewish state would be a bloody trap. It does put Jews in danger, and that's why Zionism is anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
But they're saying it the same thing, but they mean the opposite. This is a JCPA, Jewish Council for Public Affairs, which it sounds to me like it's another AIPAC front. I'm not sure what else she has to say here.
To advance the sort of inclusive future we need. Ultimately, our safety is inextricably linked and bound up with one another's and with our democracy.
Right. Okay. And yeah, another thing is like no one is excluding Jews from these are Jewish led coalitions on university campuses. That, you know, these are Jewish kids getting their heads cracked in. There's Jewish students in Germany getting arrested. There's videos of like Holocaust survivors getting thrown down the stairs by the cops.
Yeah, I remember that video we showed like a few weeks ago of like that Zionist woman on the campus about how she was all persecuted. No, everyone ignored her, and the fact is, in the background of the video, there was Jews for like Palestine.
Yep.
Yeah, that was incredible. Time. Yeah, it's anyway, AOC just nodding along, like, yep, AOC asks Stacey Burdett, who has worked for the United States Holocaust Museum that endorses the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and the ADL, how to oppose the Netanyahu government without being anti-Semitic. Stacey says that excluding Zionists from spaces is discrimination in our legal system and normalizes the idea of a Jewish ethno-state.
That makes no sense. Zionism is in favor of a Jewish ethno-state.
AOC asks Amy how to be an ally to Jewish people in this moment, and Amy responds that the line has been crossed in too many cases that cause harm to Jews at protests since October 7th, that Palestinians won't be safe if Israel is not safe, that allies must call for the release of hostages with the other policy changes people would like to see, and the allies have to be against October 7th. Yeah.
Or the bombs will keep falling, is what they mean. We'll continue to exterminate Palestinians until we feel safe. That's
pretty much.
And it's not said enough. It's not said enough that all of this shit, that whenever they reference like behavior by these protesters, I have not seen a single video of any protester saying like outright anti-Semitism, of like intentionally intimidating like Jewish students because they're Jewish. Like all these things, they just like, they all fucking diarrhea them out every day on MSNBC and shit. And there's not a single clip. Nothing comes to light.
Yeah, so these two women that AOC is talking to, Stacey Burdett worked for the ADL and was instrumental in firing Harvard president Claudine Gay. And the other lady, Amy Spittlenick, she has also repeatedly spread the widely debunked genocidal mass rape atrocity propaganda hoax. These are just, essentially they're saying Palestinians won't be safe if Israel is not safe. Like, that's essentially a threat. And
it is a threat.
It's insane. So yeah, AOC again, just a dog shit politician, and I'm sorry I ever supported her. And
unfortunately, there's not much to add on. There's not much to add.
I don't have any better news. It only gets worse. So we talked about the pier last time, the pier that the U.S. built ostensibly for aid into Gaza, which like that should have immediately raised suspicion. Like, why would the USA need to build a pier for $320 million if only they had some kind of ally on that bordered Gaza that they could like deliver aid through? But apparently that wasn't happening. All the aid trucks were getting raided by like Israeli like civilians, beating up the drivers and just demanding manifests of like the cargo. It's insane. Like these people completely lost their fucking minds. And we often wonder, like we watch movies like Zone of Interest. I don't know if you've guys seen it yet. And we always wonder, like, how can you compartmentalize the catastrophic amount of suffering that's happening on the other side of a wall? And how could we let that happen? And, you know, what would I have done if I were in that situation? Well, you're doing it now, whatever it is you're doing. I hope every listener of this podcast is doing something, whether it's attending rallies, selling your organization's newspaper on how to push back against Zionism, even just talking to your friends and neighbors and coworkers. You know, this has always been a taboo subject, right? Like, oh, you don't want to bring it up, you don't want to upset people. One of your coworkers might be Jewish, and they might be like, no, fuck that. Like, I say, bring it up. You know, things aren't going to get solved by just kind of hoping it goes away, because like that's exactly how this shit manifests, and that's how you find out your neighbors are like Nazis. You know what I mean? Anyway, so this pier, $320 million American dollars up in smoke. It just kind of fell apart, and there's no evidence that any actual aid came across it, but rather it turned out that it was actually used apparently there's evidence of like American forces were directly involved in the raid on Nuizarat, I think it's called. There's a raid that resulted in 274 Palestinians killed, including 60 children, and they rescued 4 hostages. Oh yeah, and apparently they got 3 other hostages killed. So good job, guys. Good, nice country. Good job, dipshits. The hostages that they did rescue, again, with every hostage that makes it home, immediately it goes into a gag order, because once they open their mouth and talk to the media, the first thing they say is how well they were treated by Hamas. One hostage talked about how they made them a birthday cake, and we see imagery of these hostages. They're hydrated, they're well fed, they look like they've gotten sleep, like they look like they were treated well. And their families are under attack by Israeli. You know, I don't love this term, but like I don't know how else to describe it. Israeli settlers just lost their goddamn minds, and just they've been harassing families of hostages who have been calling for a ceasefire, because the U.S. and Israeli government are like killing their family. And now these hostages are under a gag order, and they're under attack, because they said like, yeah, we were actually treated pretty well. And meanwhile, like here's a news report that's coming out of some prison. This is really graphic. This is out of the New York Times, and this is MSNBC reporting. So it's like, this is mainstream media. Like that's how bad it has to be for them to, like, they can't ignore it anymore. This is a clip from Majority Report, so you might hear Sam and Emma kind of like mumble in the background. So bear with us.
As I read the New York Times' latest investigation into Sedi Taman, an army base in southern Israel that has become synonymous with the detention of Gazan Palestinians. Since the start of the war in Gaza, this is where most captured Gazans have been brought for interrogation, after they are first stripped, virtually naked and blindfolded, and then herded into open-air trucks like cattle. The photos that have emerged from Sedi Taman show those detainees blindfolded, handcuffed, and sitting in stress positions in enclosures, with former detainees telling the Times they were forced to sit in silence in harsh weather for 18 hours a day. If they spoke or slept or tried to peek through their blindfolds, they were beaten. One said he was beaten so badly from moving his blindfold that he vomited blood. Many other detainees exhibited scabs and sores where they were forcibly restrained, with the sickest prisoners being shackled to their beds. One Israeli soldier told the Times that their colleagues regularly boasted of beating the detainees, who can be denied access to lawyers for up to 90 days, and whose whereabouts in the prison can be withheld from human rights groups and relatives, which critics say is a violation of international law. 8 former detainees told the Times on the record they had been punched, kicked, beaten with batons, rifle butts, and a handheld metal detector while in custody. 7 said they'd been forced to wear only a diaper while being interrogated. 3 said they had received electric shocks during their interrogations. They included a nurse arrested in Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City who said he was lifted by 2 soldiers and his rectum was penetrated by a metal stick in the ground, leaving him with, quote, unbearable pain. Another detainee cited in a UN report said that interrogators made me sit on something like a hot metal stick and it felt like fire. and also said that another detainee died after they put the electric stick up his anus. According to the Times, of the roughly 4,000 detainees at Sidi Taman, 35 have died. At least 12 soldiers have been dismissed from their roles at the site, some of them for excessive use of force. A doctor at the camp told the Times he couldn't understand why Israeli soldiers had captured many of the people that he treated. One was paraplegic, another weighed roughly 300 pounds, and a third had breathed since childhood through a tube inserted into his neck, he said. Why they brought him, I don't know, the doctor said, adding, they take everyone. To be clear here, this is not an accidental targeting of civilians in the fog of combat. This is a detention facility that the Israelis control, that they run. The Israeli military says that any abuse of detainees, whether during their detention or during interrogation, violates the law and the directives of the IDF, and as such is strictly prohibited. The Shin Bet, which is Israel's domestic intelligence agency, which conducts some of the interrogations at the base, said in a brief statement that all of its interrogations were conducted in accordance with the law.
Of course. No.
And while Israeli authorities have denied that there are systemic abuses in Sidi Taman, they didn't point to any tangible benefit from this system of essentially extra-legal detention. It doesn't seem to me that it is defeating Hamas or eradicating terror. This, like Abu Ghraib was 20 years ago, is a crisis of conscience moment for Israel and its allies.
I wondered if he was going to mention
and it requires that we not look away.
Good job, Chris.
Yeah, there's lots of Abu Ghraib like all over again, and
of course you notice he contrasts Abu Ghraib and these conditions to the general war going on. 40,000 dead in the fog of war. That's okay, but in these detention conditions, well, that's the red line for this guy is what it sounds like he's saying. It's okay if we go in there with bombs. I mean, that's just the fog of war. What are you going to do? We're fighting Hamas.
Knowing Chris Hayes, I think he is at least a little more critical of Israel, and I would say he was. I could give him the benefit of the doubt of having said that because he was trying to head off anyone being like, "It's war. That's what happens." But that's I've listened to him talk a lot, so I don't know.
One thing I've noticed though, and I'm glad he made the comparison, but I also remember what happened after Abu Ghraib, after we had 2 whole terms of Obama. What did he do to George W. Bush? What did he do to any of those people who ran the war and ordered the things to happen in the detention camps? He got to go off and become a painter and a guest at dinner parties. The liberals didn't do a goddamn thing. And that's what's going to happen again. They're going to wring their hands and they're going to say this is unfair. And the government, whoever's in charge, especially if it's liberal, is going to say, what are you going to do? And we're going to do that next year and the next decade and the next decade. This is why a revolutionary break is necessary.
Yep. And if there's any Israelis that are serious about ending this war, the only way through it is going to be to break with Zionism and overthrow the whole thing. Like, I don't know what else, like what else are you supposed to do? Like, there's so few Israelis breaking with it and pushing back. They're cheering it on. And if you criticize this, then you are anti-Semitic, even though like they're still pushing the narrative, even though it's not really sticking anymore. And so it really it tells me that like I think Israel really is going to lose this propaganda war. I heard an interesting interview today that in terms of like military objectives, Hamas achieved a lot of their objectives in the sense that they've put Israel back on the world stage. They've exposed Israel for what it is. They've shown that the Israeli state can be resisted militarily, and they've put the question of Palestinian statehood back into the public mind. Versus Israel's military objectives is they can't seem to get anything done without leveling multiple city blocks. They can't even rescue their own hostages. They've rejected every ceasefire deal that's come across the plate right now. Israel's losing the propaganda war.
This is the problem I have with that argument though, because if you use metrics like that, sort of global metrics, you're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, just like in Vietnam, how many how many people did the U.S. military kill?
Right.
How many whole communities just disappeared off the face of the earth like they weren't even there? How many communities today are still affected by Agent Orange? They did what they set out to do, which was devastate whole communities, even worse in the Korean War. It doesn't matter if they lose the war of ideas or maybe lose some funding. They met their military objectives by exterminating Gaza. That's what's going to happen. And everyone's going to say, well, now Israel can be held accountable for this and that. It's nice.
They're never going to hold
nice.
Israel
It's
accountable.
nice to say intellectually, but materially, those Gazans aren't coming back.
Yeah.
No, the only way Israeli officials would be ever held accountable is if you have basically revolutionary tribunals and you have a political trial for them. And that would obviously come after some kind of revolution, because there's no way, like, we can kind of see how the US is responding to like the International Criminal Court. And I think most of these international institutions are jokes anyway. You know, it doesn't matter. They just ignore it. You know, they have this rule-based order and who cares? But I think Aaron's right that Israel has, to a large extent, lost the propaganda war. I mean, the protests in the United States over this have been larger than I've seen in terms of like anti-war since the Iraq War. And this is over, obviously the US is involved, but there really isn't like the same level of troops on the ground that there was in Iraq or Afghanistan. And the fact that you had like, I don't even know how many campuses had like occupations, etc. That's impressive. And the fact that it's still including also all the protests going back to October and November and everything. There's been so much of it in a way that it's like for the Biden administration becoming almost a political liability that the war is going on. This really doesn't happen in American politics all that much.
For the first time, Israeli support is a liability. It's never like politically harmed any presidential candidate or any political candidate in any race until now.
Like, someone could correct me because I don't know what the polls show on like support for Israel versus, opposition to it. But even if it's not a majority, it's certainly it's not just like a tiny minority that is like opposed to these wars. It has very broad support. It's a large minority at the very least, that you really can't ignore.
It's I was just looking at the Google search you just ran, Aaron, and it's always put in that framework. It's always called the Israeli-Hamas war.
Yeah, that's how I knew to search for it. Unfortunately.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying that the reality of the extermination of Gaza, like it's what you brought up earlier. The issue of a Palestinian state is back on the agenda. And my question, and it goes to my earlier point, is how exactly are you going to construct a Palestinian state from a devastated Gaza? You can't. It's gone.
No, you can't.
And in multiple statements from the Israelis for the past several decades, they've said that we will create conditions on the ground such that it's a nice idea, but you couldn't do it without carving up what's left of Israel and taking it away from the settlers, taking it away from what's already, materially Israel. You would literally have to either overthrow the government and put in some sort of new regime, or you would have to empty Israel of people, which is what they use in their propaganda. They say you want to slaughter all the Jews, when all we mean is change your ethno-nationalist government that's currently exterminating an entire piece of land.
So poll here says,
anyway, sorry,
according to Reuters, 34% of registered voters approve of Biden's handling of the war, which is 53% of Democrats, 31% of independents, 22% of Republicans. Only 22% of Republicans like Biden's handling of the war. Now, are Republicans divided on like he's not going hard enough, we should just nuke Gaza, or are they like,
well, the Republicans
maybe back it off, man?
You're not supposed to be for Biden at all.
Yeah,
like not even provisionally. That's how I read that number. Is that the number is so low? Is that there are so few Republicans who would consider cross-party whatever these days?
Yeah, right. Because they would support it if Trump was doing it.
Oh, that number would be a lot higher.
Yeah.
And for the exact same circumstances. which is why I see it mostly as I want to say politics, but that's a partisanship. That's the word.
Wow. Here's a Politico. 33% of Democrat voters felt the president was not tough enough on Israel.
Jesus Christ.
During the Gaza conflict, while just 8% said he was being too tough. What would he have to do for the 8% to not be too tough on Israel? Take together those two groups are roughly
40,000 people dead. Actually, the number is probably far higher. I stopped looking at the numbers.
It's probably closer to 100,000, if not more. Like, I guarantee, because they're still pulling bodies out of the rubble.
I've seen as many as 200,000 quoted places.
Taken together, these two groups are roughly equal in size to 42% of Democrat voters who said his approach was just right. So 42% of Democrats still approve of
Goldilocks
what
and the
Biden's
three
doing.
goddamn bears. That's how they do polling. Nursery rhyme. What the absolute?
Well, the average American's grasp of politics is I mean, we are all political brain poison sickos, but like it is the average American's grasp on politics is baffling, and it would appear insane. I remember text banking for Bernie, and someone's first choice. I had to ask, what's your first choice for president? You know, Bernie's pretty great, and their first choice was Amy Klobuchar. And I'm like, okay, well, what's your second choice? And they're like, I don't know. I don't really have a second choice. Ben Carson, I guess. It's like, what are your politics? Like
Ben Carson? Wow. Hey.
the sleepiest man in the politics. He was so sleepy. I also read recently it's the 34th anniversary of the death of Thomas Sankara.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Rest in power.
I'm reading a book of his speeches right now. Pretty cool.
So this is from African and Black History. So 36 years ago today, Thomas Sankara, a revolutionary African leader, was assassinated by French imperialists. Sankara drove out French imperialism from Burkina Faso and withdrew from the IMF and made the country non-reliant on foreign aid. He was assassinated in a coup led by his close ally, Blaise Compaoré, supported by French imperialists. As far as African leadership goes, Thomas Sankara was cut from a different piece of cloth. Here are some of his accomplishments. Only 4 years in power from 1983 to 87. This is just an incredible list of achievements that he did here. He vaccinated 2.5 million children against meningitis, yellow fever, and measles in a matter of weeks. He initiated a nationwide literacy campaign, which increased the literacy rate from 13% in 1983 to 73% in 1987. He planted over 10 million trees to prevent desertification. He built roads and a railway to tie the nation together without foreign aid. He appointed females. I mean, it says females here. Like, I would just say women. He appointed women to high government positions, encouraged them to work, recruited them into the military, and granted pregnancy leave during education. He outlawed female genital mutilation, forced marriages, and polygamy in support of women's rights. He sold off the government fleet of Mercedes cars and made the Renault 5, the cheapest car sold in Burkina Faso at the time, the official service car of the ministers. He reduced the salaries of all public servants, including his own, and forbade the use of government chauffeurs and first-class airline tickets. He redistributed land from the feudal landlords and gave it directly to the peasants. Wheat production rose in 3 years from 1,700 kilograms to 3,800 kilograms per hectare.
Right there, Aaron. He redistributed that right there is like the big red flag. He redistributed lands from the landlords, giving it directly to the peasants.
Yep.
That was a big thing in the Russian Revolution, was that issue, and all the white guards, in the Civil War, they were all backed up by those landlords. So yeah.
Yep. And then there was the problem in the Russian Revolution when the peasants, like afterward, they were forcibly collectivized. They're like, hey, wait a minute. The whole point of supporting the revolution was that we were promised like land to the tiller, like this is our land and we're supposed to be able to do with it as we please. You can't just forcibly, you can't just force us to collectivize. So he just over doubled the production of wheat. And the country was self-sufficient.
Country, but not the landlords.
No, certainly not. So he opposed foreign aid, saying, "He who feeds you controls you." He spoke in forums like the Organization of African Unity against continued neo-colonialist penetration of Africa through Western trade and finance. He called for a united front of African nations to repudiate their foreign debt. He argued that the poor and exploited did not have an obligation to repay money to the rich and exploited. In Ouagadougou, Ouagadougou, sorry. Sankara converted the army's provisioning store into a state-owned supermarket open to everyone, the first supermarket in the country. He forced civil servants to pay 1 month's salary to public projects. He refused to use the air conditioning in his office on the grounds that such luxury was not available to anyone but a handful of Burkinabés. As president, he lowered his salary to $450 a month. He limited his possessions to a car, 4 bikes, 3 guitars, a fridge, and a broken freezer. He was a motorcyclist himself. He formed an all-women's motorcycle personal guard. He required public servants to wear traditional tunic woven from Burkinabe cotton and sewn by Burkinabe craftsmen. The reason being to rely upon local industry and identity rather than foreign industry and identity. When asked why he didn't want his portrait hung in public places, as was the norm for African leaders, Sankara replied, "There are 7 million Thomas Sankaras." And lastly, I love this little bit. As an accomplished guitarist, he wrote the new national anthem himself.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just we'll end the show. We'll give a left opposition red salute to Thomas Sankara, a true comrade who, within the confines and limitations of revolutionary ideas and borders and nations. I think he did pretty damn good here, and that's why he was such a threat. And this is why understanding things like permanent revolution is so important, is because it was the French imperialists who ultimately had to put a stop to it. This is why we need to understand these ideas and theories. Is why we need revolutionary movements, not just in the colonial countries, but in the imperial core itself. And this is why Shea envies the American comrades when he says, "You get the biggest task of all, the belly of the beast, is to overthrow the United States."
Aaron, may I suggest that our outro music be that national anthem?
Oh, fuck yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Find it and just,